Welcome to another episode of We Don't Die. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the international best-selling book called We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. And just a reminder, you can always find me at my home base, which is wedon'tdie.com. We offer medium classes. We have a fantastic free Sunday gathering inspirational service with medium demonstration included. And if you'd like a free PDF copy of my book, We Don't Die, you can certainly have it. Just at the bottom of the page at wedon'tdie.com, you can enter your name and your email address. You'll get a pop-up with a bunch of things after you do that. It says you get the first few chapters of my book, but here's the secret. It's the whole book. And you'll find chapter 10 is about grief. I know many people come into these conversations because your heart is very sore with the passing of a loved one. So I always say read that chapter first because it'll give you some tools to move through the grieving process and understand what's going on. So now we're going to meet our fantastic guest. She is a dear friend, fabulous lady. Her name is Mel Braun. I actually met her many years ago. Her husband is a race car driver, and her family would come to the racetrack, dine under our hospitality tent. They loved our brownies, as I can remember. But Mel and I would have these extraordinary conversations about life, death, the afterlife, Reiki, spirituality. And it was great. Anytime I saw she popped under the tent, I'd be sure we'd have some kind of special conversation. But since then, she has done so much. She has channeled all that passion into her life's work, which she's doing right now. She's a mindfulness educator, a medical Reiki master, and the author of a beautiful book called Magic Mama, an energetic and mindful approach to pregnancy and childbirth. Now, Magic Mama isn't just for mamas, because as we'll find out in our episode today, there's so much really good stuff for all of us human beings. Mel's journey began when her successful career in real estate revealed a powerful truth that she is an empath. This discovery led her on her own path of inner healing and a mission to teach others how to safeguard their energy and connect with the magic within. She's got some great stories I know about life and the afterlife and signs and good things that we'll talk about on our show today, plus everything else she's up to. You can find out more on her website, which is melbraun.com. Now, Brown is spelled Braun, and her Instagram is the same at Mel Braun. Mel, my dear friend, welcome to We Don't Die.
Thank you, Sandra. Wow, what an introduction. That was lovely. And we do go way back. I was thinking about it earlier before we hopped on. We met in 2012.
No kidding.
Yes, it's been that long. Yes. And to your point, our conversations underneath the hospitality tent, besides being there to support my husband, but that was always the highlight of my weekends at the racetrack with you. I just loved those conversations. And that's when you were new into exploring this yourself. And I remember buying your book right there and talking about some of the content there, which I've read multiple times. And I do agree on chapter 10 on grief, even years ago before I was experiencing more grief as, people around me were aging. I found so much benefit in it. And it also helped me support others through their grief by reading that chapter. So agree. Go and download that chapter.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, 2012, my dad had passed in 2010, and then I was on the journey. My book didn't come out until 2013. So you were definitely there every step of the way. So thanks for your support.
You're welcome.
And I'm thrilled to be able to support you and your mission because it's not just for mamas, but it's weaved in. So let's hear a little bit about your background, a little bit about what led you down this path. Over to you.
All right. I mean, I just kind of fell into, this lifestyle really now. And I always say Reiki, I did not go looking for it. It found me. And as we all know, there's just certain things that come up at divine timing. And as you shared my real estate career, which I've since dissolved and stepped back, but I still do a dabble in referrals. But that's when I really realized I was an empath. And the magnitude that that had on my overall physical body made so much sense as an adult because I would be very sick as a child. vomiting all of the time. And knowing what I know now about energy, I think of the body as a 5-gallon bucket. And the only way that my body knew how to get rid of this energy was through physically purging to make more room of the energy of others that I was constantly absorbing. And then on down the road, in my real estate career, I got shingles in my early 20s. So that was a mega telling sign of what was happening in a subconscious level of the stressors and everything that I was taking on. So that really led me down the journey of explorating, the idea of Reiki, mindfulness, energy work as a whole, not just for empaths, but really for everyone. Whether we're an empath or not, we all feel and absorb energy. So that's really something that I highlight a lot with my clients and people that I speak to and work with, and certainly in teaching Reiki. And that really just segued into understanding more and more, and me going down the road of my own healing journey and understanding the emotions that I was carrying that I didn't even know was inside of me, and how this continued to wreak havoc on my physical body. And then my mom was undergoing a lot of physical ailments that medically made no Western sense. And I heard in a meditation that Reiki could help her. And sure enough, I actually tell the story in my book, but a quick snippet here. She was getting remarried in October of 2020, and she wanted to be able to walk down the aisle, stand for the ceremony, and dance with her new wonderful husband. And I am proud to say that with regular Reiki and energy and mindfulness work, I walked her down the aisle, gave her away to her new husband. She stood for the ceremony and danced with such happiness with her new husband that night. So that also really propelled me to explore energy work and Reiki further, because I was witnessing firsthand what it not only was doing for me, but now my mom, and seeing the relief that she had, and then all of my Reiki clients. So that's when I embarked on the journey to become a medical Reiki master as well. So I've been trained to give Reiki in the operating room. And I did not realize how that deep understanding would support me in the last moments with my aunt as she was in the hospital. I should have grabbed some tissues, but um,
That's
so we
okay.
could, yeah. So
Don't
so
worry. I
we
want to
can
just
go
back up
ahead.
just a
Yeah.
little bit about Reiki because some people know the term, some people kind of have an idea what it is, some people don't. I know in a second I'm going to just ask you to explain what it is, but I know for me, I was given a free Reiki treatment as part of a spa service, and I'm like, sure, I'll try anything.
Why not?
And I remember lying there, and wherever the therapist had her hands, it was kind of over my belly-ish area. Um, my eyes were closed and I didn't know what was happening. All I know is I felt a tremendous amount of heat. And I thought she had some kind of a light or heating element or something. And when I opened my eyes, because I wanted to say, hey, turn that down just a little,
I'm kind of sweating.
kind of like when you're getting your hair washed at a hairdresser and the temperature's too high. It was just like, yeah, can you just turn it down a little? And it was just her hands over me. And I thought,
Mhm.
there's something to this. So talk a little bit about what Reiki is, and then we'll talk about your aunt.
Yes. So before I really go into Reiki, I do want to say my first ever Reiki session, which is also what prompted me to really dive in deeper to this. Same thing. The lady put her hands on my abdomen, which I now know was on top of the liver. And I started uncontrollably sobbing. I mean, drowning in the mucus and the tears, like the boo hoo, ugly crying. And what was so interesting to me is I had no thought, no memory as to what would be stirring up this deep rooted emotion in my body. And then I got so angry. And as I've went down the journey of educating myself further of the emotions that store in the body, the liver houses anger and resentment. And so that's a whole other conversation, but that's what really prompted me to keep learning more and educating and finding out what was going on, because it was the most bizarre experience. And I drove home in a daze, like, what just happened? But it was truly life changing. And then the rest is history, as they say. But how Reiki works is someone who has went through what we call an attunement process. Think of it as like a ceremony, if you will. That's what differentiates a Reiki practitioner or a master from another hands-on healing practitioner. So some may have had like a healing hand therapy, but Reiki is a little different because of this attunement process. So I am merely the facilitator. Reiki flows through me, through my hands to the person that I'm working on. And the easiest way I can describe Reiki is it balances the energy in the body. So think of when you're driving down the road and you're in your car and the car starts to veer to the left and you're like, well, that maybe it's out of alignment. You then take your car to the skilled mechanic, and the mechanic says, yes, Mel, you were exactly right. Your car is out of alignment. So the mechanic does their thing. And now you hop back in your car, and the car is now driving the way it is intended. Reiki is like the skilled mechanic for your car, but you are the car, you are the vessel. So it is merely balancing the energy in your body. That is not woo woo, that is quantum physics. We are comprised of these atoms. And the Reiki is just, I think of the sifting for gold, the panning for gold, and it's sifting through all of the energetic debris, the toxins that we take in, which doesn't matter how healthy you are, the air we breathe, what we eat, what we put in our skin. We are constantly inundated with toxins. So that is a benefit from the health side of Reiki is it helps eliminate those toxins so your body operates the way it is intended to. Additionally, it takes your body into homeostasis. So, ideally, we want to keep our body in that parasympathetic nervous state, not sympathetic, which is the fight or flight, which is our hardwired brain puts us in sympathetic state. We always think the saber-toothed tiger is chasing us, but it's not really there now, hopefully. And so, Reiki is going to help bring your body back into that parasympathetic state, which is what promotes your body's innate ability to heal itself. So that is why regular Reiki or energy work in particular is very, very effective because ideally, when we are in alignment the way we are intended, dis-ease, sickness, physical ailments cannot reside there.
So you as a facilitator, I've
Hmm.
seen some incredible pictures of you being with babies in the hospital, and my heart just
Yeah,
goes
I
out.
know.
But is it a universal energy coming through?
It is a universal life force energy. We all have the capability to tap into this life force energy. And that could be God, it could be your higher consciousness, it could be source, whatever you want to call it. We all know that there's something a little bigger than us out there. So that is the loving energy that you are tapping into. So I think of Reiki as like prayer on steroids.
I love it. That sounds great. All right, let's dive into what people have come to this show for, the afterlife, and then we can talk more about energy and other good things that you do.
Mhm.
Tell us some stories. Tell us about your aunt, and you can grab tissues if you need to, but
I know. I'm
be
like,
be fully at home here.
right.
It's
No,
tough.
I know. It is tough. And I want to start by saying I've worked with a lot of clients through their grieving process. So, anyone listening to this episode, just know to give yourself compassion and grace. And it is not linear, there is not a definitive timeline of when it's going to end. And what I have found in my grieving process in particular that was surprising for me is it's not like certain anniversaries. It's the random Tuesday that I'm driving to an appointment that I would call my aunt and we would have our deep conversations. Those are the times when it stings the most. Um, and I didn't really understand how Reiki would benefit me in the capacity that it did. So, a little bit of background about my aunt. Her passing was very shocking and sudden. She was always extremely healthy, never smoked, never drank. She was in her mid 40s doing fitness competitions, a really wonderful woman. When I got into real estate right at 18, she was a real estate appraiser. So we had that in common, and we would always talk about real estate. And then, even prior to that, when I was a child, she would pick me up on a Friday afternoon, and I would have a slumber party at her house on the weekends. And I remember Chinese food, shrimp stir fried rice was such a treat. And we would get that and go to Blockbuster and rent a couple of movies, and it was just so much fun. But one um, time with her in particular, we were driving down the road, and I was only 8 years old, and she was always very fascinated by the brain and biology. And she also, prior to becoming a real estate appraiser, got into hypnotherapy. So she was a hypnotist and traveled around for these seminars. And even at 8 years old, she was having this very adult conversation with me about the brain and the research that she had done and how she found it so fascinating. And I just remember thinking, like, wow, she's speaking to me like I'm an adult. And I got that. And I still remember where we were driving that day. So just know that the conversations that you have with children do leave a lasting impression. So, then I got into the Reiki side of things, and that intertwined with our conversations on the energy and the mind body connection and how it's all intrinsically connected. And so then she watched my son for me a lot. So I was able to write my book, and that was really fun of talking about the developmental phases and again the neurons wiring and firing in the brain and how fascinating that was to watch firsthand for her. And February 2nd of this year, 2025, was her 72nd birthday. And she had this like cough. And she had had these coughs multiple occasions, like in 2024, that she was like, I don't know, could be allergies, could be a little cold. And there were times that she couldn't come over to watch my son because she's like, I don't think that I'm contagious, but I don't know. So we were always very cautious. And so it was her birthday. And that was the last day that I was able to have a real conversation with her. Um, and we just, we're talking about everything. And the launch of my book was coming up, which was on my 38th birthday. And we were talking about all of that. And then I was going to Sedona for the launch. And that weekend, it was a Saturday afternoon that I received the news that she went into the hospital. And they said that she had pneumonia. Now, I also find it fascinating because this is something that I preach to all of my friends and family and certainly clients and spend a lot of time educating people on, which we touched on earlier with being an empath. But the way that emotions store in the body and how they showcase themselves. And with grief being a topic here, grief stores in the lungs. And then we go into the generational trauma, which I call generational emotional imprints. And there's a new fascinating study of science called epigenetics. And I'm going to tie all this back in because this is really important for listeners to understand. So, epigenetics is where your emotional imprints that your mother, even your grandmother experienced, changes the epigenome of your DNA. So, this is where the word generational trauma really comes from. And it's important because my aunt was the only person left in the family. Her three brothers, her mother, and her father have all had lung conditions. Her mother and father both passed from lung conditions, and then all three of her brothers have COPD, emphysema, and she was the only one. Now, remember, she never smoked. And in working with her in the hospital, the medication, because she had never, was never under the influence of anything, she really just didn't like the way that the medication made her feel. She said she just felt really out of it and very foggy brained. So even though I had talked to her about Reiki all of these years, giving her Reiki in the hospital was really, really such a deep connection of us as energy. And when I gave her Reiki, I sobbed. And the nurses were coming in and checking her vitals. Um, and I couldn't stop crying because I felt that energy before. And she wasn't consciously aware of where her spirit was going. But I had felt that other times with working with clients and my grandfather. And so after the Reiki sessions, she said she just felt so much better because she said, I feel clearer. My head feels sharper and I feel more intact, which is something that Reiki really does for a lot of people and why they come for stress and anxiety relief and headaches and that foggy brain, because we want to keep our energy in us instead of floating around. So I do the Reiki session and I'm just crying as I am now. And she says, I'm so sorry to upset you. And I said, you're not upsetting me at all. This is just a very beautiful moment that I'm taking in. And I started to have the conversations with her of, how do you want to communicate with me when the time comes? And she holds my hand and she says, honey, we're not there yet. And I knew we were, but she did not. And I just said, I understand we're not, but as you know, I like to have conversations with people on how they're going to communicate with me. And it could be years from now, but I just want to know. And she said, okay, I'll think about it. I said, okay. So, about a week later, and every time I would go to the hospital, I would always meditate before I went in, and I would always ground my energy. I would do my circle of prayer because going into those situations and being as sensitive to energy as I am, I did not want to take on anything else. Plus, I knew that I wanted to show up for my aunt in my highest capacity that I could because she needed me to be her solid, supportive, grounding self. So, a week after that, I go to the hospital and the doctor greets me in the hallway and he said, we've done everything we could do. It's time. And they had ended up doing a graft from her lung that showed she had a very rare condition called aspergillus, and you get it from mold. And it had just embedded over time, and I really believe that year leading up to those, her having these coughs and these colds was the onset of that settling into her lungs. So, we, spoke that day, and they decided that hospice was the best and unfortunately the next step, which again, the whole thing, I mean, this happened in a matter of 5 weeks, and she walked herself into the hospital, and then now 5 weeks later, you're talking about hospice. And in those moments, and anybody who's ever experienced grief of someone passing very quickly, suddenly, and it's just flabbergasting. You're just in utter shock and disbelief, and I kept every day I would leave the hospital, and certainly after we decided that hospice was the next move, I'm like, "This is just a bad dream," right? Like, this is not my reality. This is not happening. She's so healthy. I would have sworn I had another 15, 20 years left with her. She was always so spry and active, and certainly her brain was always active and reading and educating and researching, and it just was just such a shock for everybody. And so before we went into hospice that Friday afternoon, she said, I've decided how I want to communicate with you. And I said, okay. And she said, a cardinal. And I was like, all right, a cardinal it is. So we transitioned her to hospice, and anybody that has ever been around someone that goes to the next phase to transition, they go through these different phases where they're kind of out of body and then back in body. And then they have that spry moment at the end. And that's when you really start to know they're starting to transition. And she wasn't able to fully communicate. She had, all the tubes in her throat and everything, and then constantly on the oxygen because her lungs were working so hard. So I was only able to communicate with her via her whispering. And then when she went to hospice, I have a whole video of us having a conversation where she's holding my hand and she's kind of like doing Morse code. And I'm like, do you hear me? Do you understand me? And she's squeezing my hand. And I said, isn't it so fascinating that we've had all these conversations about the brain? And I know you can still hear me. And I said, I know you're going to communicate with me through my dreams. And I will be there. I will be listening. I will miss you having you here physically, but I know you will always be with me. I just know." And she squeezed my hand so tight, and she knew. So, that afternoon, I go out to the nurses' station, and I was asking them a couple of questions, and I look over, and on the nurses' station desk was this snow globe box with a tree with cardinals all over them. And I stopped and I was able to take a picture and a video of it. And they even turned it on. I told them the whole story, which people in hospice are just angels walking the earth. I mean, they really are so lovely. And I told them this story and they just smiled. And my aunt came back to enough at that tail end of that last, peak of her being able to really communicate. And I showed her the video and I said, "Look what is here. Out of all the things that could be here, look." And she kind of opened her eyes and she smiled. And I said, "We don't understand. There's always a bigger plan. And we don't understand why for us this seems so soon. But this is a sign that you are exactly where you're supposed to be." And she smiled and grabbed my hand and nodded. And it was such an endearing moment to share with her that also brought comfort in that moment, as sad as it was. Wow, I really should have grabbed a tissue, but that's okay. So, um, her and I had the conversations of me being there or not. And I said, "I understand sometimes, you know, it may be too much for your energy body to have me here." And she said, "No, I want you here." And I said, "Okay, I will be here." And she asked for another Reiki session. And when I gave her Reiki in hospice, I did not understand the immense amount of grief that she was carrying. And it made so much sense to me. The light bulb moment went off. And this is what I talked about earlier with the epigenetics and the generational trauma that can affect us and why this energy work is so important. So, in working with her, I started to have these different flashes of moments of her life that I didn't know that she had experienced or that she had harbored in her body emotionally and suppressed and buried for so long. And I felt so sad that she didn't have the tools at the time to to give her the relief that she and everybody deserves. And so we worked on clearing that, and when I was talking to her as we were going through, it was really fascinating. You could almost see her breathing become unlabored as this heavy energy of grief was releasing from her body. It was one of the most profound Reiki experiences, truthfully, I've had, and I've had some pretty wow moments that people would it's just jaw-dropping. So to share that moment with her of someone who really was the segue of opening my mind to the mind-body connection all from that conversation at 8 years old, and to have it come full circle in that moment was such a beautiful gift for both of us. So, it was a Tuesday, and it was, March 18th of this year, and I left hospice, and then I, came to pick up my son. My in-laws were in town, who you know, and we were at dinner, and my aunt, my brother, or excuse me, my uncle's her brother, wife called me, and she said they called me Missy, and she said, "Missy, the nurses came in and they're giving us the signs that she's getting closer, and she's starting to take the more shallow, longer breaths in between." I said, "Okay, I'm leaving dinner. I'm coming right there." And so I'm on my way and I'm giving myself Reiki in the car, and I do another grounding visualization before I stepped into the hospice room. And I was by the bedside holding her hand, and I was there as she took her last breath. And it was such a beautiful moment that I relive all the time because I felt such gratitude to have the conversations with her of how she's going to communicate with me, to say everything I wanted and needed to say, and to have that peace and that closure. So, anybody, if you get the opportunity to do that, take it. It's not selfish. And I do really believe it helps their soul transition because they understand that you're going to be okay. And I know it's hard for people to comprehend. And from an energy perspective of what I've seen, telling someone, I can't do this without you, or things like that, I don't find it as helpful for that person transitioning and can keep him or her here longer. And giving her the reassurance that I was like, I know you're going to be with me. It's okay. It's safe. You're filled with love and light. I'm here. And that also, I'm still shocked when it happened and she took her last breath. I felt so solid and grounded, and like everything was a blur around me, like time stopped. And, my aunt and my uncle and everybody's crying and they're like, this is a nightmare. And I'm like, she's at peace. And isn't that something that we all want for those that we love oh so dearly? And again, I really believe knowing that she's still with me does bring me additional comfort. So there's been multiple ways that she's already communicated with me in such a short amount of time. It's only been actually today is the 5-month anniversary of her passing. Um, so when I was editing the Audible version of my book, I was walking with my son in the stroller and walking our dog, and I'm listening to the Mindful Mama chapter. Of all the chapters I could be listening to, I'm listening to that one. And specifically, I was talking about mental rehearsal, which is what her and I always had conversations about of what are we mentally rehearsing? And that is then creating our reality. So I'm listening to this part of my book and we're going up this hill and out of nowhere, whoosh, flies right in front of my face. What do you think it was?
A
A cardinal.
cardinal.
A cardinal. Mhm. And I stopped and I looked up at the sky and I looked at the trees and I smiled, the biggest smile from ear to ear. And I said, I see you, I hear you, and thank you. And it was such a cool moment that I will forever have etched into my heart and memory. And then she's also, as her and I discussed prior to her passing, she has visited me in my dreams, as her and I discussed. And if anyone has ever experienced a visitation, it's very different than a dream. And when you wake up from these dreams, it's like such a deep knowing in every cell of your body that they were there. And it's such a warming feeling, at least for me. And there's been different messages that she's given in the first visitation and then the second visitation. Sandra, it was uh, I can like see, it's like I'm hearing and seeing it all happen again. It was so real. It was so beautiful. And she loved the beach. And in this visitation, I heard seagulls and I heard the ocean. It's like I could smell the salt air and I hear the ocean waves crashing in the background. And she says, it's so beautiful here. She said, it is everything I've wanted because I get to be at my favorite place every day. I am at the beach and I am loving it. And it was such a relief, because we're like, I want to know more and I want to connect with them. But to know that she felt happy and vibrant. And it's like when I saw her, she was frozen at like her perfect age, that she felt her best. And she just looked so fresh. It was amazing. Truly, truly amazing. And I woke up from this visitation and I wrote it all down. It was 1:47 in the morning, and I'm, like, on the couch writing all this down, and I am boohoo sobbing as I'm writing out these details because I was like, "This it just seems unreal." And in that visitation, she also said she was going to start visiting my husband too, and it would be in different ways, but he would know because it was the best way that she could communicate with him, where he would know that all of this is real. And to my knowledge, that's not happened yet, or he's not connected the dots yet. But I'm writing all of this down, and my husband, comes out of the bedroom and he's like, What is wrong? And I was like, Aunt Vaughn visited me. And he's like, Well, isn't that great? And I was like, Yes, it's so great. But then you relive that again, and it's like, it's such a great moment to have that you wanna savor, but then it stings again. And so this is like we were talking earlier, it's not linear, every day is going to be different, and maybe it was just leading up to this conversation with you, but I was like, "Gosh, I just really miss her." And when I feel those moments, I take time in silence and I talk to her. And I, know that she's watching all of the developments of my son, which I know she's always so fascinated about. And so I just talk with her like she's here because she is here. It's just in a different form. So that is now that I can take a moment to like breathe.
Breathe, breathe. Thank you for sharing that. I know it's
Uh,
never easy, and, I just think of my dad's passing and how awful all things were around that, but without it
yeah,
happening just the way it did, we wouldn't be here today.
exactly.
And so your conversations you had when you were 8 years old talking about the mind and having that relationship and even the conversations about the Cardinal and all that, her being open to it, it's gonna make a difference. I know for me right now, you're really not just waking me up to, well, let's say the magic or reality of Reiki and energy healing, but also you're talking about epigenetics. And I just interviewed a few weeks ago a lovely lady, Bernadette Thompson, who talks about energy. She talks about ancestry. She's grief and trauma expert. She's tapped into her spiritual side. And she talked about that same thing, that imprint from past generations. And like, that's totally new to me, you know?
Mm,
And then even being an empath, I know there's listeners and viewers right now that get caught up in emotions and are thinking, where the heck is this coming from? Well, it might be because you're tapping into somebody else's. And I think the more we get into our own spirituality, the more we meditate, the more we start thinking of the bigger picture, I think the more open we are and the more sensitive we become too. So this
absolutely.
is a conversation I think that is going to have people be interested in finding out more of so many different things. So I thank you and I thank your aunt too, because I know she's going to be with you every step of the way. You've got a lot going on and the healing and just the gift you are in so many ways to so many people that you got her right by your side. So thank you for sharing all that.
Absolutely. Oh, truly my pleasure. And I hope, to your point, a lot of us are not as educated on, I call it energy hygiene, and understanding the magnitude of how, when we really break it down from a science perspective, because if some people, they need that data, they need those hard facts. Your energy, those atoms are constantly emitting and absorbing energy. And so when you understand, even walking past someone in a grocery store, that's an energy exchange. Especially you've heard about the energy vampires. When you're a light, people do. They will suck that energy from you unintentionally and unconsciously. But really, and when you go, for those that are grieving, and if you're going through an experience where you're going to a celebration of life or you're going into hospice with all of this other energy that's been there, it's really imperative to safeguard your energy and ground your energy and then cleanse your energy after you're in those environments because you don't want that to linger.
How do we do that? I know
Well,
you talk about this in your book, and I want to get into the book too, because it's, like I said, it's for mamas, but it's also for
it's for everybody.
everybody.
Yes. So the easiest thing, I actually recorded a video that I'm going to post on my Instagram this week on that. But the easiest way to cleanse your energy, this is what I teach in my Reiki 1 training, and then also is in chapter 5 of Magic Mama. So this is called Kenyoku in Japanese, which we know in English as dry bathing. So this is a very simple technique to take with you. So you can start, you put your right hand, let's practice together, Sandra. We could do it together. We all need a good energy cleanse, especially after the crying. Okay. So right hand on the left shoulder, and then sweep across the body diagonally to the right hip. So you sweep and down. And then left hand to right shoulder, diagonally, sweep down across the body to the left hip and off. And then right hand, left shoulder, sweep the arm, straighten the arm and sweep. And then left hand to right shoulder, sweep down the arm. And that is Kityoku. And that's how you can cleanse your energy on a dime like that.
So that's cleansing. How
Yep.
about grounding ourselves? You talked about meditating
Mhm.
so much.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
also maybe creating that safety net so that
That's
these
right.
energy vampires can't
Yes.
get in.
Hey, I am all about it. So, um, a grounding technique that I love to teach people that's very simple and effective is I visualize a white light coming in through the crown of my head and I pull the white light. Usually I visualize the chakras, but if you want to go into that, we can. But I pull them through all the chakras, and then it ends at the bottom of the tailbone, this white light. Then it splits into two, goes down each leg and into the bottom of the feet. Then on my exhales, I guide that light down into the earth and I am growing these tree roots, growing deeper, stronger, and wider. And then whenever I feel like I'm ready, I inhale and visualize retracting those roots out of the earth and back into the bottom of my feet. And this is something, if you want a longer tutorial on how to do it, I do have that on my website as a resource of a video. So that's just melbrown.com, spelled Braun. And you can look at that. And then you could just do it when you're brushing your teeth. It's that quick. It doesn't have to be a long thing. But if you want to spend more time doing it, then you certainly can. And then as far as safeguarding your energy, there's multiple ways to go about it. Um, One of the things that I really like to do that I say morning and night is a circle of prayer. It's something that I learned at like this spiritual school, if you will, that I used to attend. And that is very effective for me. I share that in the book if you need that write up. And then you can just visualize a white bubble, like an iridescent bubble around you as well. So energy coming to you bounces off the bubble and back to them. And I always share that if somebody is coming with negative energy that you don't want to absorb, when it bounces off your bubble, send it back with love, light, and compassion because that's probably what that person needs at that time, anyways. And then if you find yourself in a situation where you didn't ground, you didn't safeguard your energy, and someone is bringing negativity towards you, or you're just feeling a little off, I, in my mind, just say, return to sender. So you can use that as well.
I love it. Return to sender. Well, let's talk about Magic Mama. I was so excited when you were writing it and when it came out and the launch and all that. And so many of our listeners I know have taken me up on the offer of getting a copy because it isn't just for mamas, but it is for mamas too. So talk about why you wrote it and a little bit about your journey and what's in the book.
Absolutely. So, the reason that I wrote the book was honestly, there was a void in what I was searching for when I found out I was pregnant in 2023. And There's so much information on what to eat, what not to eat, what exercises to do, what not to do when you're pregnant. But I felt there was such a deep element of the spiritual side, the energetic side of what was happening and I was experiencing firsthand. Um, my son communicated with me telepathically while he was in the womb. So I talk about that. I talk about going into the different clairs and how to really build up that intuitive side of, your practice and how to connect with your baby when they're in utero. And then certainly before they can communicate with you, there's ways that you can communicate with them through those clairs. So I talk about that. And then really, I wanted people to have a deeper understanding of their energy body, their emotional body, and the mental body. And as we talked about earlier, it is all intrinsically connected. You cannot separate them. So, whether you are looking to conceive or give birth or just be a better human and understanding that you do have the power to create your reality, because at the end of the day, everything is energy. Every thought you have is an energetic frequency that is communicating with your body, with those atoms that we were talking about earlier. Every emotion you have is simply energy in motion. So when you're going through these experiences in life, you really start to understand you're not this physical body that you see. This grief that you feel is energy moving through your body, but it doesn't define you. And I just felt like that was really powerful. So the first 7 chapters of the book are really apply to anybody on the planet that wants to understand more of what this physical body is and how these things, like we've talked about, the mental side, the emotions that we go through, and how they do communicate with our bodies physically. To tie into that, it has been also interesting how my body is processing grief. And because I understand the magnitude and the importance of processing these emotions so they don't store in the body to create physical havoc on the body. I've had it seems random, but it's literally every like 6 weeks, like clockwork. I have a mega sinus issue. I have a sickness. I have things like that. So, those that are listening that are processing grief, just maybe keep a journal of things and start to understand maybe were you grieving or missing that person extra? And then a week later, you get sick and start to understand again that mind body connection and how your body is processing and moving this energy and emotions through. And then as far as the other half of the book, it's I talk about my birth, and I also have a chapter on mama's intuition, because we all have intuitive gifts. We are all born with that beautiful intuition, and sometimes it's religious backgrounds and upbringings that have said, don't do that. It's the devil's work, which we know that is not the case because we are all light and all have this beautiful capability. But there were so many times as an early mom when doctors and other professionals were making me out like I was a hypochondriac. And I was like, no, something is wrong with my son. And so I share those deep stories that hopefully lend support to other people on trusting that gut intuition. It's there for a reason, and it's a beautiful gift to have, and we just need to lean on it and trust it. And, yeah, and then I talk about raising energetically aware children, because in my Reiki practice, there's been a lot of children that have had these ailments that did not make Western sense. And in working with them, I have come to find they are psychosomatic, or they're carrying their peers' energy. And so, really empowering these young adults and children with these tools that we just talked about earlier, of the cleansing, the grounding, the safeguarding their energy, is huge when they go into the world for themselves. And so, we're raising energetically aware children to be adults and to show up better and safeguarding their energy.
Beautiful words. Let's get back a little bit to the ancestral healing
Mm.
that might need to take place.
So, do we need to talk about this more when we hang up? You're
No,
like, okay.
we're gonna talk about it now because other people are interested too. It we can't turn off grief. There are things we can
Right.
do to move through it, to
Mhm.
understand it, but it's
Mhm.
a natural process. But we don't want people to get stuck in it either, right? So
Right.
there's things we can do. So that's about grief, but also I know, I'm hearing more and more about epigenetics and all that stuff. But if we have picked up some energy from the past,
Mhm.
some stored energy,
Mhm.
can we use this practice of grounding and whatever just to kind of keep ourselves fresh,
Mhm.
and to start that healing process ourselves? Does everybody need to go for Reiki, or can we start the healing ourselves? I guess is what I'm asking.
Great question. So I really love teaching Reiki 1 to anybody willing and ready to learn, because Reiki 1 is all about self healing. And imagine a world where everybody, if we just focused 1% more on self healing, and that could be physically, emotionally, mentally. So, energy work is extremely powerful. And I have seen that really, I don't want to say cut it off, because it definitely processes these generational traumas, and we all have those, right? There's always like, well, this is my maiden name is Fields, so this is a Fields thing, or this is a Champlain thing. There's always that tie that seems to be a topic at the dinner table, right? So these are the things that you can work through. And I will also say, talking through it, that's still a form of moving the energy. So, if you're grieving and you're going to talk therapy, that's very powerful too, because that's also helping you move that energy through. But if some people aren't comfortable with that, or they're just not ready for that, and that's why I love Reiki and I love empowering and teaching people Reiki, because then they can do it for themselves. And it's another way to just become aware. We get so distracted with all of the technology these days, right? And so we're missing that self connection. And Reiki really is a way to bring yourself back home and understand the energetic and emotional and mental landscape that you have internally. I'm a huge fan of sitting in silence. And a lot of us are afraid of that because we are addicted to chaos. But these are just little things that you could do. But really, and hey, moving, go for a walk. Nature is healing. Shout, scream, cry, anything that you can do to move that energy through your body is powerful. So there's not a right or wrong way, but those are definitely some touching points for people that they can take away with that.
Thank you very much. Two last things for you. One is to talk about website/Instagram page, what you got going
Mhm.
on there. And then I'm going to ask you for some thoughts that you can leave for our listener.
Ooh.
And we'll wrap up this episode. So, what can we find on your website and Instagram?
Yes. Well, since you've talked about people may be new to the idea of Reiki and energy work as a whole, on my website, just www.melbrown.com. You can go there. There is a Reiki page, so you can read a little bit more about Reiki. And then I also have my Reiki trainings on there if you're ever interested in that. I do offer those in person and via Zoom. I do have a training. We have a few spots left. It's the end of September. So that is coming up. If anyone is interested, just send me an email through the website or reach out to me on Instagram, which I'll give that in a moment. But so there's resources there. If anyone listening or knows someone who is expecting, which I feel like we all know someone who is expecting. That's why Magic Mama is like the modern day energetic what to expect when expecting, because it's a different idea of things to support the mom to be. But there are resources there. There are printable affirmations, because I am a huge proponent of positive affirmations. So you can find those on the website. There's free videos. I'm certified in yoga as well as pre and postnatal yoga. So there are yoga videos and workout videos to support someone who is expecting. And even if you're not expecting, there's still great workouts. So that could be a good place to start. And there's also recipes, because after we give birth, we deplete our chi energy, which is what makes up everything. Every life force around us is made up of chi. So we want to help give ourselves that proper nourishment. So there's over 50 recipes on my website that you can access, that I've pulled from other people, that I've used their recipes to help nourish my body. So you have access to that as well. And then just to get to know a little bit more about me. And if you're looking for positive content, once a month, I put out a newsletter that just fuels your soul. It's just feel good content. So if you're looking for that, please leave your email. And I would love to just connect with people in general because having a community is really everything. We need our tribe. And as far as Instagram, I'm most active there as a social media platform, and my handle is the@themelbrown.com. So you can reach out there. And I give, again, just helpful tips, content. You'll see me traveling with my husband and son and all of that fun little snippets of our life as well. But anything that I can do to support anyone on their healing journey, their grieving journey, if you have questions, I would love to be a sounding board, support system, however I can be.
You're a great lady. Thank you for all that. And what message does Magic Mama want to leave with our listeners today?
Mm. I touched on it earlier, but it is just the darn truth. Trust your intuition with everything. Always trust your intuition. It's never going to steer you wrong.
Beautiful. Mel, thank you for being our guest
Oh,
today.
thank you, Sandra. As always, it's such a treat to just spend time with you selfishly. Thank you.
I know it's been a long time since we've seen each other face to face. And yeah, life's got turned upside down when old COVID hit and we lost our
I
catering
know.
business, but we're our forever eternal friends. And also to our listener or our viewer, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Remember, you can check out melbraun.com, Brown spelled Braun, and at the Mel Braun on Instagram. And also, always come visit me at wedon'tdie.com. Take me up on that offer for the free copy of my book. There's a lot of empowerment in there. Plus, every Sunday, we have that free inspirational service on Zoom, 2 p.m. New York time. They're all recorded, so you can watch past replays, but there's a medium demonstration included in each and every one, so you know just how close our loved ones truly are. So much going on. That's all at wedon'tdie.com. In closing, I'm Sandra Champlain, and it always is my pleasure and privilege to be your host on We Don't Die. I do believe that life is an education for the soul and that your life here on earth is important. There's so much more to us than meets the eye, and I love having these conversations that tie in a little bit of physics and energy and all that, and opening us up to new conversations. So whatever is in your heart, whatever you're passionate about, keep exploring, and I'll do my very best to continue bringing great guests and great conversations. So, in closing, I want to thank you for listening or for watching, and we'll see you again soon.